right, today we're talking about something a little weird, that unwanted guest that can sometimes show up in your mouth, an oral cyst. You've probably heard the term, but what is it really? Let's dive in and demystify this whole thing.
Have you ever had that moment? You're just minding your own business and you feel this strange little lump in your jaw or on your gums. Your mind immediately starts racing, right? But more often than not, the culprit is just a cyst. Okay, so what is a cyst, really? The official definition sounds a bit clinical, but the key takeaway is right there. It's not created by the accumulation of pus. That's the single biggest thing that separates it from, say, an abscess or a typical infection. It's its own unique little fluid-filled sac. Right, so let's get into it. What is this mysterious lump actually made of? I mean, if we're going to understand where it comes from, we first have to understand what it is. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because not all cysts are built the same. They basically fall into two camps. You've got your true cysts, which have this special lining of cells, an epithelium. Think of it like the actual rubber wall of a balloon. Then you have pseudocysts, which are more like just a pocket of fluid without that distinct organized lining. Okay, so where do these things even come from? They don't just pop up out of thin air, right? There's actually a fascinating biological story here, a whole life cycle that explains how they get started and how they grow. And really, you can think of a cyst's life in two super simple stages. First, you've got initiation. That's the spark, the moment something kicks a few cells into gear. Then you've got enlargement, which is exactly what it sounds like. That little cluster of cells starts to grow. So that spark, where does it come from? Well, believe it or not, it often comes from these tiny little leftover cells from way back when our teeth were first forming. It's kind of wild. They're like these little cellular ghosts just hanging out in our jaw, remnants from our own development. And when something like inflammation comes along, it can wake them up.
All right, so once it's started, how does it get bigger? The absolute best way to picture this is to think of a biological water balloon. It's not really growing by making tons of new cells. It's growing because it's slowly filling up with fluid.
And this right here, this is the engine that makes the balloon inflate. It's all about something called osmotic pressure. Basically, as cells inside the cyst's lining break down, they release proteins into the fluid. This makes the fluid inside saltier or more concentrated than the tissue fluid outside of it. And look at this. The difference is tiny, 296 inside versus 282 outside. But that small difference is everything. It's basic science, right? Osmosis. Water wants to move from a less salty place to a more salty place to balance things out. So fluid from your body gets slowly pulled into the cyst, and that steady, gentle pressure is what makes it grow. Okay, so now that we know what a cyst is and how it grows, let's meet the usual suspects. This is kind of like the most wanted list of oral cysts. While a bunch of different types exist, just a few of them are responsible for most of the cases. And would you look at that? This chart tells you almost everything you need to know. One of them, the radicular cyst, is the big one. It's over half of all cases. So let's obviously start there. All right, the radicular cyst. This is the king of cysts, the most common one you'll find. And its story always starts with a non-vital or dead tooth. So here's how it goes down. A tooth's nerve dies. That causes inflammation around the root tip. And that inflammation is the trigger. It wakes up those little cellular ghosts we talked about and tells them to start building a cyst. And because they grow so slowly and are often painless, a lot of the time you don't even know one is there until it randomly pops up on a routine dental x-ray. Okay, so who's number 2 on our list? That would be the dentigerous cyst. And this one has a totally different backstory. It's all about teeth that haven't even made it out into your mouth yet. So what's happening here is the cyst actually forms in the little space around the crown of an unerupted tooth. You can picture it like the cyst is hugging the top of the tooth while it's still buried in your jawbone. You see this a ton with wisdom teeth, which, makes perfect sense. All right, we've talked a lot about the problem. So what about the solution? The good news is this isn't some big medical mystery. Dentists and surgeons know exactly what these are and how to deal with them. The path is actually really clear. And one of the first diagnostic steps is actually pretty cool and kind of low tech. A surgeon can just use a needle to draw out a little bit of the fluid inside. And as you can see from this chart, what comes out tells a huge story. Is it clear and straw-colored, or is it this thick, creamy white stuff? Each one points to a different type of cyst. Now, when it's time for treatment, there are basically 2 main game plans. The most common is called enucleation. Fancy word, but it just means they go in and shell the whole thing out, getting rid of the entire cyst in one piece. But for really big cysts, there's another option, marsupialization. This is where they just create a little window into the cyst, making it part of your mouth. The pressure is gone and it slowly shrinks on its own.
Woof, we have gone through a lot. So let's take a second and just boil it all down. What are the key things you absolutely need to remember from all of this?
Okay, here's the bottom line. That word, cyst, it can sound pretty scary. But what it really is a fluid-filled sac. It's not an infection. It grows because of simple water pressure, like that biological water balloon we talked about. They usually come from leftover cells. They're almost always benign, and the treatments are super effective. It's a known quantity.
So in the end, it's actually kind of fascinating, isn't it? These oral cysts are a wild reminder that our jaws are literally holding on to the cellular ghosts of our own development, little pieces of the past waking up in the present. Pretty incredible when you think about it.